I'm going to read it for you so we can all listen to it. Oakville of today is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations, from the Anishinaabe to the Arawandran and the Haudenosaunee. Oakville is uniquely situated on the head of the lake, Treaty Number 14 and Treaty 22. Summer and Grace Gallery gives gratitude for our time on this land. We would also like to acknowledge Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for open conversations around truth and reconciliation. As I said, I'm Alex Scott, the director of the gallery, and the reason we're here this evening, though, is really because of the gallery owner, Cindy Cottrell. Cindy obviously founded the gallery 3 years ago, wanting to promote Canadian art and artists, and it's now well on its way as establishing itself, and of course tonight is a whole other level for Cindy. When I came to work with Cindy in the spring of this year, she was saying, wow, the world is really rocking and rolling, particularly south of the border. And she is a very proud Canadian, like most of us, or all of us here, I'm quite certain, and comes from an older London, Ontario family, and wanted to do something that, really spoke to the country. And she wanted to do something around the flag and all of the values of what she believed is an amazing place. And came to mind was my contact, Charles Pachter, and he graciously invited us to his studio, and we've been working with him over the summer. And Ali Rosenzweig, our curator, also social media person, curated this collection for this evening's event. And in a uniquely Canadian way, where we all say, here's a great idea, how can I help? Can I be part of it? Let me move this along. I then chatted to Sarah Milroy, and she said, great, I could come and talk to Charles about the Susanna Moodie journals, which of course Margaret wrote when she was 27, and Charles illustrated in his 30s, and they are part of the permanent collection of McMichael, and we are fortunate to have a set of the artist proofs here tonight, 6 of which we have framed, and we have more if you're willing to want to take a look. They're here at the gallery, and they are just incredible. So, no further talking from me, but I want to hand the mic over to Sarah and Charles, who are going to chat to you, maybe a brief introduction. Charles is, he's got so many awards on his lapel there. I was taking my photo today, I'm like, is that the Order of Canada? Is that the Order of Ontario? Is that this? Here you go, sir. Tell us about yourself a little bit, very briefly, and then Sarah, and then if you could take it and sort of lead the conversation.
You want me to tell you about myself?
Just a little.
Oh my goodness.
Not the naughty bits.
Not the naughty bits. Nothing else to say.
It's not short, yeah.
I'm a Toronto boy, born in Toronto in 1942. Went to U of T, studied art history, and then went to the Sorbonne of Paris when I was 19. Et j'ai appris cette belle langue, et à cause de ça, j'ai eu un travail à l'Expo 67. I worked at Expo 67 in Montreal. Then I got my first job teaching at the University of Calgary in 1969. Saw my first moose crossing the highway on a snowy winter day. Came back to Toronto. When Andy Warhol was doing soup cans, I did a whole series on the Toronto streetcar, and there's one of the prints here, which was shown at the Isaacs Gallery in 1972. In 1973, I heard on the radio that the Queen was coming to Niagara-on-the-Lake to open the new Shaw Festival Theatre, and Pierre Trudeau started calling her the Queen of Canada. And as the grandson of immigrants, I couldn't understand the monarchy particularly because our head of state didn't live here. So what did I do? I put the Queen on a moose, and it caused a scandal, and it became my most famous painting. It was in 1973, 52 years ago. Because my gallery at the time, Av Isaacs, who had a successful show of my streetcars, said, I can't show these paintings of the Queen, and I don't have to tell you why. Because in those years, the Canadian establishment venerated the monarchy the way Catholics did the Pope. Today, that's all history, it's gone. But because I was into mischief all my life, I decided to opened the show, I had a house on Shaw Street, the first house that I bought. The Queen was in Niagara on the Lake opening the Shaw Festival Theatre. I called my show the Other Shaw Festival. And a friend of mine sat in a Rolls Royce with his wife in the back going like this all afternoon with a hat and a glove. It made press around the world. At age 30, there were fillers in newspapers saying Canada enraged over Queen on Moose, monarchists threatened to slash canvases, artists warned to stay indoors. It was ridiculous. P.S. I never sold one painting. 7 years later, a woman named Lorraine Monk, who many of you may have heard of, she started the Canadian Museum of Photography in Ottawa. She moved to Toronto. She saw the painting of the Queen on Moose hanging on my wall, and she said, "How much do you want for it?" I said, "I don't know, $500? She said, "Oh, I can't give you that." I said, "What do you give me?" She said, "I'm giving you $10,000. She said, "It's the most important piece of pop art about colonial Canada that has ever been created." This was Lorraine Monk. She died last year at age 93. Her husband, who's 30 years younger, owns the painting. He was trying to get Ottawa to buy it. They haven't yet. He put it up for auction and it was sold a few months ago at Cowley Abbott. But what can I say at age 82? I've been lucky. I've had a great time satirizing mischievously and with affection this country, but I also got lucky enough to meet Margaret Atwood when I was only 18 years old at summer camp. She had a hut in the middle of the woods full of snakes and toads and frogs, and she called me up over where the kids were sitting at her feet. She asked me to stroke a toad to prove that I wouldn't get warts. We became friends, and we've been friends ever since for the last 60 years. She is the joy of my life, my muse, my inspiration, and you're about to see one of the reasons why she means so much to me. I'll hand this over to Sarah, whom I've also known for 40-odd years, did the first piece on me in Canadian Forum back in 1983. Whew, here you go. To the one and only Sarah.
I need a little more, line.
Pull the chair over.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, together again.
There we are.
So yeah, that's right. I mean, the piece I wrote in Canadian Forum, I think it was the second piece of art criticism I ever wrote out of university. And it was because it was such an incredible engagement with such an important cycle of poems. You were part of that. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but part of that moment in Canadian culture that was like a yay can, the first elbows out moment. It was McClellan Stewart was in full gear. You know, Ab Isaacs was running his gallery on Yonge Street with this wonderful, rambunctious stable of artists, and you were among them. It was, you know, leading up to and around Expo 67, this moment of sort of unbridled patriotism, and you rode right into the middle of that with the journals of Susanna Moodie. And I wanted to just ask you to, it's always been my, if I'm honest, it's always been my very favorite piece of work that you've made over the years, and it's such an important set of perceptions that you brought together in this. Can you tell me, you've just already said how you met Margaret Atwood, but what struck you about the poem cycle and the original literary text that it comes from, which I have to confess I have not read. I thought I was going to read it this week, but that didn't happen. But I'm going to trust you to tell us about that first piece and then Margaret's interpretation of it.
Well, as I said, I got lucky enough to meet Margaret when I was only 18, and I went off to the Cranbrook Academy of Art in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, where I did my master's degree, and she had sent me some of her early poems then, and I was so overwhelmed by their beauty and their melodic, accessible quality that I did my master's thesis on Margaret Atwood. No one had ever heard of her then. She was this mousy little creature from Victoria College who came to visit me in Cranbrook. But I did 6 handmade books of her work in very small editions, lithographs and silkscreens, which were the prelude to Susanna Moodie.
Do you still have those?
I don't have any. I have 1 or 2 copies left, but many of them are in collections in libraries and museums all over.
I feel an exhibition coming on.
Here we go.
Yeah.
But when I was working in Montreal at Expo 67, I was 25 years old. She was at Harvard, and she sent me a typewritten manuscript of the poem she had done on the Journals of Susanna Moodie, based on the original Susanna Moodie's Roughing It in the Bush, which she said she had read in high school but had been pretty much shelved. The minute I read it, I knew it was brilliant. I was so overwhelmed by it that I decided then and there that I wanted to do a luxurious folio based where I would illustrate each of the poems. We applied to the Canada Council, we were turned down. It went on for maybe 8 years, and what finally happened was I was, the other side of my brain, I was a bit of a real estate junkie, and I was buying old dumps on Queen Street in Toronto and renovating them, and I had a company called Artists Alliance Building Limited where I had over 50 tenants, a restaurant, a gallery, and because of the increased value of the buildings, I was able to borrow money, and I brought 2 printers over from Spain. And for 9 months in February of 1980, we printed the Journals of Susanna Moodie, 13,000 separate hand-printed impressions. These guys were incredible and very demanding, but the poetry was so spectacular that it just kept us going. It was like adrenaline. If you'll pardon my reach here, I'm going to read one of the poems to you. This one was based on the immigrants coming into Canada because of the cholera epidemic. It's this one up here. It's called Further Arrivals. After we had crossed the long illness that was the ocean, we sailed upriver. On the first island, the immigrants threw off their clothes and danced like sandflies. We left behind one by one the cities rotting with cholera, one by one our civilized distinctions, and entered a large darkness. It was our own ignorance we entered. I have not come out yet. My brain gropes nervous tentacles in the night, sends out fears, hairy as bears, demands lamps, or waiting for my shadowy husband, hears malice in the trees' whispers. I refuse to look in a mirror. I need wolf's eyes to see the truth. Whether the wilderness is real or not depends on who lives there.
Well,
Can you believe this? The words is so magical and melodious. This was the entire collection was like this. Every single poem had its special quality. And her greatness, I truly believe, despite her fame and her reputation as a novelist, I can say this without embarrassment, I've had difficulty with the more recent novels. I was okay with Alias Grace, I was okay with some of the earlier pieces, but to me the poetry is her greatest strength. It's brilliant, and it's readable and understandable, whereas a lot of other poems aren't. But anyway, Sarah understood all this right to the nth degree.
Yeah, it's interesting that you know, I flagged that page in this book because it's my favorite poem from the cycle as well. And this idea of entering this great darkness, and the darkness is our own ignorance. I mean, that she was writing this in 1969.
She wrote that in 69.
And, you know, all the discussion about, of course, what she's dealing with there is, you know, entering into indigenous lands. And, you know, taking stock of the darkness that she's entering into as her own ignorance as a European person. These are ideas that we really started talking about in earnest with land acknowledgements and everything else that how we've tried to move forward from the history of colonialism in this country. Like, this is 40 years, 50 years ahead of the curve in terms of her sensitivity. And the other, you know, element that's so strong in Journals of Susanna Moodie, there's in that poetry cycle, is this idea of nature, you know, this fundamental insight that both Northrop Frye and Margaret Atwood had, that the fundamental experience of being Canadian is about being in a kind of situation of threat by nature. That, you know, the British tradition of landscape is that, you know, you're settled in your cottage in the Cotswolds and the sheep are grazing. The Canadian version of being in the landscape is that you could be killed at any minute. And the storms are fierce. There's bears. There's no way to protect yourself against, you know, such an inchoate part of the world, or inscrutable, at least to us as Europeans. And, you know, she captured that, and these are themes that are in this print cycle that are absolutely central to how we go about, like, framing the way we show art and deal with Canadian culture at McMichael, for example. Like, it's such an inspiring and important bellwether set of ideas that she put in play with this print cycle. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the decisions of how you settled upon how are you going to illustrate some of these things, because they're not exactly like explicitly related to the content of the poem.
Once I took each poem and almost memorized them by heart, I became so much more attached to them, and somehow the images just flowed out after I would memorize the poems. And I don't know where the one is of the first neighbors. It's probably not on the wall here, but a couple others that I will read. That this is the very first poem when she gets off the boat in Quebec, and she says, "Disembarking in Quebec. Is it my clothes, my way of walking, the things I carry in my hand, a book, a bag with knitting, the incongruous pink of my shawl, this space cannot hear? Or is it my own lack of conviction which makes these vistas of desolation, long hills, the swamps, the barren sand, the glare of sun on the bone-white drift logs, omens of winter, the moon alien in daytime, a thin refusal. The others leap, shout, freedom. The moving water will not show me my reflection. The rocks ignore. I am a word in a foreign language." And I didn't do a painting of her in her pink shawl.
Right.
I was more interested in just the feeling of the human figure in this barren landscape. And you see I repeat this imagery of her several times in the different poems. The very last, second to last poem, right over here, it's called Resurrection. And this is just, she's been underground and she's now rising up out of the ground into a new world. And she says, I see, now I cannot see. Earth is a blizzard in my eyes. I hear now the rustle of the snow, the angels listening above me, thistles bright with sleet gathering, waiting for the time to reach me, up to the pillared sun, the final city of living towers, unrisen yet, whose dormant stones lie folding their holy fire around me. But the land shifts with frost, and those who have become the stone voices of the land shift also and say, God is not the voice in the whirlwind. God is the whirlwind. At the last judgment, we will all be trees. There you go. That's Margaret. But each poem was like a trigger for me and pushed my imagination. This was an earlier time in my career when I had spent a lot of time doing expressionist images.
Yes.
I euphemistically called it my fucked up period when I was in my 20s. I was trying to sort myself out. And a lot of my work was angst-ridden. But if you'll pardon me daring to compare myself to Picasso, I've also had 8 different times in my life where my work has changed. And long after I'm gone is when the curators will start to look at my stuff and see which period was examples of work from each period to show the difference. For example, it's a long way from that to the flags. I did my first flag painting in 1980. I had bought a farm up in Oromadonte, north of Barrie, on a warm summer night. I took a flag that I bought at a Canadian Tire store in Aurelia, and I stuck it in a fence post hole. I was lying in a hammock watching the flag moving in the wind as the sun was setting, and I had an epiphany. I spent a whole year painting the Canadian flag, and I opened a show on Queen Street in November of 1981, the day after Pierre Trudeau had announced the patriation of the Constitution. And the whole Toronto art world was there. Most of them are now gone. Bluma Appel, Beatrice Fisher, Lorraine Monk, these women who were instrumental in my career, a fabulous crowd. The day after, in the Globe and Mail, John Bentley Mace, who had his own personal problems, he suffered from depression, said about my work, are you ready? More over the couch art for the walls of patriotic dentists. That's what he said about my flag paintings. Bluma Appel went berserk. She was one of my biggest collectors from Montreal. And she said he should be sued for slander and all the rest of it. Years later, because of John Bentley Mays, in the WASP art world, if you have a hyphenated name, you're taken more seriously,
Yeah, I
right?
guess so.
I made up the name of a fake art critic. Are you ready? And I took out an ad in the Globe and Mail when I opened up my own gallery. You have to get the pun here. He's named after 3 rivers. His name is Don Rouge Humber. And Rouge Humber is hyphenated. So I put an ad in the Globe and Mail, and it said, so stunning words fail me, a legend in his own mind, signed Don Rouge Humber. I'm sitting in the gallery on a Saturday afternoon, I'm thinking, this is so boring. Out of the blue, this guy walks in, thick German accent, and he ends up buying 6 paintings from me. And I said, how did you hear about me anyway? He said, well, I've known of your work for years, but I see glowing review in Globe and Mail from Don Rouge Humber. I said, oh dear, what do I do now? I don't want to be accused of fraud. On the other hand, I'd like to make the sale. So I said, well, there's something you should know. I made up Don Rouge Humber. He's my alter ego. He took out his check. He said, in that case, do I make this to you or to him? P.S. Since that time, it turns out he's a gazillionaire from Germany.
Oh,
The family owned 100,000 acres of hardwood forest north of Sault Ste. Marie,
Okay.
all because of Don Rouge Humber. And many other artists have asked me, who is this guy who loves your work so much? And how do we get him to write about us? So you gotta be nice to Don. Get it? And there we are. So I've never looked back since then. One of the things I've learned, quite seriously, it sounds like I'm making light of this, but once you reach a certain stage in your life, you stop worrying about what anybody else thinks. And you do what you're good at. You run with it. And in truth, I was always better at selling my own work than the dealers. The system, I was a middle-class kid who came from a middle-class family, and I had good business skills. And because of it, I was often sidelined by the official art world. Once I'm gone, nobody's going to remember any of that, but I've had such a successful career as a business-minded artist. You know, not that many artists can sell $700,000 or $800,000 a year worth of art. You know who loves me? The CRA. They've audited me 4 times, but I'm always good to them, and I'm very careful. But I have been very, very lucky because the last few years, what I call my Warhol branded images, flags, barns, and moose, are going out the door. And I'm thrilled about that, and here I am at 82, about to move to Mexico. I bought a home in Ajijic, which is a beautiful town on Lake Chapala near Guadalajara. Keith is so ecstatic, he's learning Spanish. I learned how to say, encantado de conocerte. I'm enchanted to meet you. Thank you very much. Delighted to meet you. So here I am now, going to be debuting my work at this beautiful home in this town of Ajijic, filled with affluent Canadians and Americans and people from all over the world. I happen to have had a home in Miami Beach from 1993 to 1999, and I did a lot of very funky paintings from Miami that I've taken down to Mexico. And I may get a show in Guadalajara, I may get people from Miami who will see the show down there, but it's a different world. It's a different world from Canada. I'm still taking my flag paintings down and my moose. The name of the house is Casa Alce. Alce is Spanish for moose. Casa Alce. So there we are, up to date.
That's fantastic. Pleasure to hear your stories, always.
I found myself thinking,
The last few days preparing to come and see you about this moment that we're in right now. And I wanted to ask you to take us back to the patriotic moment in the 60s and 70s. What was happening in the world? What were the feelings as the the Canadiana or Canada, CanCon, that term first comes into existence. People are consciously promoting Canadian art and culture. And what brought that into being? And what's different about the moment we're in now? Because we're now in another CanCon moment, which is why these are never fresher, because they are a distinctly Canadian perspective. Both your work as an artist and Atwood's very distinctly Canadian perception of landscape that she and human cultural history in this country that she encapsulates in these poems. What's different about that moment from this one as a lover of Canada and a patriot?
Well, Margaret was instrumental back in the mid-60s when she wrote the book Survival about Canadian literature, and having grown up, she called herself a war baby. No one had heard of any Canadian writers at the time. Right. And in the 60s, House of Anansi and a whole group of other writers, Al Purdy, she introduced me to other poets whose work I illustrated, Alden Nolan from New Brunswick, and John, what was his name? John, remind me of the other poet from Saskatchewan. It'll come to me. John Newlove. Mm-hmm. So she introduced me to both of them, and I illustrated their poetry as well. But the 60s was a time when the draft dodgers were coming in, and we all were looking after them.
America was in crisis then as well.
Yes.
In this moment of resurgence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether anybody could have predicted what's going on in the States now, and how this one human being could have affected the whole planet the way he has, and how we're trying to deal with it the best way we know. It's pretty frightening. But I never cease reminding myself about how lucky we are to live in this country, and how blessed we are. And here we are, this second largest landmass on the planet, with only 40 million people. We could easily handle 100 million, and we will in the next 20 years. But I've often asked myself, how do young artists manage at a time like this, when we were once taught who was important and who was special? Now, the two most overworked words in the English language are awesome and iconic. That's what the kids say to each other online all the time. You're so awesome and you're so iconic. And there's a dearth of discernment as to who is a giant versus who is average. The kids all think they're all awesome and iconic. So it's hard to know how are they going to make a living? Whenever anybody asks me, what percentage of artists are good at business versus those who are not, I say it's the exact same number as people.
Yeah.
Maybe 3%. Who knows?
So when it comes to the history of art, who do you think is awesome and iconic? Like who are the ghosts?
Well, I have some favorite Canadian painters. I think Joanne Todd's terrific. I love her work. She's a good friend. I love Graham Coftrey's work. I thought he was just lyrical and brilliant. There's so much talent which will never be in New York, in the galleries, or any of that. All over the world there's talent like that everywhere. Often I look at stuff and I go, how did this guy get $60 million for a balloon of a dog? Remember who?
Yeah, Jeff Koons.
Jeff Koons. I mean, the art world is insane that way. There's no way of knowing.
I mean, one of the things that I think about sometimes, I see this like obsession with making it in the U.S. Or particularly, not so much now, but in that kind of interregnum between the moment you're describing in the 60s, 70s, and now when there's a kind of renewed pride in Canada. There was a long kind of a desert that stretched between where it was all about getting out of Canada, and every artist that I met seemed to say that they were part-time in Berlin. You remember that? It was like, everyone was like, if they flew at 35,000 feet over Berlin, they said that they were partly in Berlin, because it was just not cool, to be Canadian. And I remember having a very heated discussion with an artist who's now in mid-career, a woman artist, and she was bemoaning the fact that, she was not making it big in the United States. And I said to her, is it not enough to be beloved in your own country? Like, think about Patterson Ewan. Think about Joyce Wheeland, who's now everyone here, if you're enjoying this conversation, should go and see the Joyce Wheeland show at the Arcade Ontario. It's just extraordinary, but another sensibility that kind of emerged at the same moment that we're talking about here. Is it not enough to be loved in your own very great country that you have to agonize about the fact whether or not someone's paying attention to you in Los Angeles? Like, why cry yourself a river over that? We are enough here. We take care of each other. We have a country everyone else in the world wants to be in because of these, these progressive values that may not always be achieved, but at least there's a shared ideal in Canada. And I think that's where our patriotism is perhaps different than our friends south of the border. It's not a pugilistic patriotism. It's about aspiring to a shared ideal of how we live together. And, I feel like the work that you've done all these years is not jingoistic and militaristic. It's kind of taking the mickey, it's taking the piss out of the Queen, putting her on a moose. It's like humble, humorous, approachable, and then also, in a work such as this Prince cycle here, like deeply intelligent and cherishing of our own histories. And I deeply admire that about you. I have to say.
One of the greatest things that's happened to me in the last 10 years of my life is that I've had shows in Japan, France, Germany, India, and because of this wonderful woman sitting in front of us right here, Asma Mahmood, who runs the Canadian section of the Mississauga Art Society. There she is, Arshad and Asma. Asma organized my exhibition in Dhaka, in Bangladesh. Why? Only this could happen in Canada. A very wealthy collector who, with his wife, had a timeshare in Collingwood, stopped at my studio in Aurelia in the summer of 2016. He had an Alfa Romeo convertible with a license plate Dhaka. And dummy that I was, I didn't know what Dhaka was, the largest city in Bangladesh of 28 million people. Anyway, he ended up buying 6 paintings from me, and it turned out he was the president of the board of the National Museum of Bangladesh in Dhaka. And Asma organized this brilliant exhibition where the further away you get from your own country, the more you're treated like royalty. They gave me an opening and private dinner parties. And this is a city of nearly 30 million people, of whom 29 million are horribly poor and the rest are horribly rich. And this guy was in a 4-story condo with attendants and guards and automatic elevators taking your car up to the 23rd floor and all the rest of it. But it was a fabulous experience, and I have since been very lucky that I've sold art all over the world, but not in the States. To private collectors, yes, but I've never had a show in a public gallery in the United States. My biggest effort in the States was in 2001 when I did a painting called Side by Side of the Canadian, American flags together after 9/11. And Air Canada gave cheap airfares to over 1,000 Canadians. We flew down to New York City in December of 2001, and I had to sign by hand 900 prints of the flag. My hand nearly fell off. My mother was there with a box of ice, and she kept dipping my hand in the ice. We raised $900,000 for the fire department in New York City. They were speechless with gratitude. I mean, the poster said, "Canada loves New York."
Yeah.
And we did that for our neighbor when they had their tragedy. So now that they have a different kind of tragedy, we don't know what's going to happen. But I can say that I have had a certain amount of impact in the States. I have sold work in Texas, in LA, but to private collectors. But I've never had a major exhibition in the States. It could happen before I'm gone. You never know. What do you think?
You're right, though. I mean, it is a pretty tough fate to be a Canadian artist. You have to, I understand what that woman was saying about not getting international attention. And I'm haunted by something that the late David Silcox told me about the funeral for David Milne. And many of you here will know David Milne is one of our great modern painters, contemporary of the Group of Seven, completely different in his intellectual interests, a very cerebral artist, but really truly one of our most marvelous creative spirits.
And David attended his funeral, and there were so few people there that he could hear the janitor vacuuming upstairs in the offices. Now that is a tragic metaphor, I think. Like the silence of so few people in that room and someone vacuuming upstairs and oblivious to the fact that it was David Milne's funeral downstairs. We have to do better at supporting our artists and being enough for each other. We are so blessed to be in this country, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that this is 100% what our museum is about at the McMichael. And we are about to build a $150 million new facility for Canadian art, and it's because I am bloody well determined that a museum of Canadian art in this country is going to be world-class and beautiful, of the artists whose incredible sensibilities deserve that kind of a showcase. The other thing I wanted to say tonight before we wrap is that if any of you are interested in learning more very quickly at an accelerated pace about Canadian art, the Art Toronto Art Fair opens on Thursday night. The tickets are easy to get. You will find all the leading dealers from across Canada will be there. And it's a way to kind of, in a very accessible way, quickly walk up and down the aisles and just kind of get your feet wet, meet people, and explore everything that Canadian art has to offer from coast to coast. It's a very efficient and very fun way to kind of get a toe in the Canadian art world. So I sure hope you do, and we will be loving seeing you there. And Charlie, thank you so much again for making the beautiful work that you've made, for loving your country the way you do, and for being here with us tonight.
I just want to close by saying, I'm 82, and if you buy one of my paintings now, when I'm gone, it'll be worth triple. The exception being Sarah, of course. I have to say that my entire career has been pretty much a maverick outside of the official institutions. I've done so well. My greatest pride is in seeing one of my key paintings hanging in the home of an intelligent, affluent collector. That means more to me than if I'm in an institution. That will happen when I'm gone. The collectors will donate my work to the institutions, and they'll get the tax receipt. So this is your chance. Buy now and get lucky in 10 or 15 years, okay?
You're here.
Thank you.
Charles Pachter was patriotic when it was not his time.
Well, I really want to thank Sarah
It's such a
and
pleasure.
Charles for being here tonight. I mean, you've made us not only feel cool to be Canadian, but cool to be in Oakville at Summer and Grace Gallery this evening. To each of you, I hope we've provided you with something to think about, something to smile about, and take great hope about our country, our artists, the reason we're having a commercial gallery here, or museums like Sarah's, the McMichael and Kleinberg are renovating and going to be bigger and better and bolder than ever before. So I hope you go and visit the McMichael and the Canadian Art Fair this weekend, which is sponsored by the McMichael. I shouldn't say that, but it is. A terrific opportunity to support Canadian artists, creativity, and Canadian culture. So to each one of you, I know many of you live here in Oakville, have made your family and your homes and your I don't think a lot of you work outside of here, but you've just been part of the fabric of this Canadian town. And if there's something that you see here on this wall or that speaks to you, we'd be happy to chat to you. Of course, the pieces behind me are all individually signed by Margaret Atwood and Charles Pachter. They're fun, they're dynamic, and Charles, of course, gave us terrific tutelage and poetry recitation.
And I
this
think
evening.
you're selling for the entire cycle framed for
23,000.
23,000
Yeah,
Canadian
we would do
dollars.
the whole
All
thing.
30
You're getting
pieces.
original
Less than
artist
one painting.
proofs and maybe even a coffee with Charlie when he comes back from Mexico, huh?
Signed by me and Margaret. I got her to
And-
sign them.
Yes. So to each one of you, thank you for being part of this important conversation. I hope you'll share the story that you heard tonight with others, and I hope you'll come back when it's not filled with people. I've been in here late in the evening and early in the morning and sat amongst these works of art, and just come and be here. You don't have to buy anything. Bring a coffee. You can bring your dog in here. We're really liberal minded, and we just want to share Canadian culture. culture here in Oakville with as many of you as possible. But as I said at the beginning, the reason we're here though is because of Cindy Cottrell, the gallery owner, and her vision to celebrate Canada, most especially this year. And I know she thanks all of you. She's had a very busy week, and she really wants to express her gratitude to Sarah and Charles, and of course the staff and everybody that's pulled this show together, and to Ali for curating it. So
Beautifully done.
thank you, thank you, thank you. That's what Canadians say. And we're glad you're here, and have a lovely rest of the evening.
I'd like to close by telling one Canadian joke. Are you ready? Two doofies are out in the woods and they shoot a moose. They're dragging it out to their truck and they're pulling it along by the tail. An old hunter comes along. He says, "That's not the way to do it. You're not getting any leverage and you're ruining the fur. It's much easier if you pull them by the antlers." They said, "Okay, we'll try." Half an hour later, they're pulling the moose along by the antlers, and one doofy says to the other, "You know, it's true this is easier, but we're getting further and further away from the truck."
There you go.
Thanks, Charlie.